Welcome to our Superstonk AMA. We have AJ Dinger, Head of Business Development at the Telos Foundation with us today. Thank you for doing this. So tell us about yourself and about Telos.
Yeah, first of all, really excited to be here. As a personal aside, I would say for about 2 to 3 months during COVID, my principal form of entertainment was the GME short squeeze. So for all the fans out there, the squeeze will never be squoze. I'm really excited to be here. So a little bit about myself. My name is AJ Dinger. I run business development for the Telos Foundation. I joined Telos about 18 months ago, in the beginning of 2022. So it's been a very interesting time making my first, kind of full dive into Web3. But really what my job is to focus is on everything ecosystem growth. I started talking with the GameStop folks in January, and we made a decision probably about 9 or 10 months ago now that gaming was going to be kind of the thing that pulls us out of this, kind of sideways bear market in crypto. The next wave of adoption is going to come through gamers, and so we're really excited about that. My professional history prior to that, spent a bunch of time on the finance side. Started my career in investment banking. I promise it's not all bad. I exclusively banked and raised capital for renewable energy companies, and then did a variety of stints at various tech startups from early stage through post-acquisition, in Fortune 500s. So on the corporate development side and the revenue growth side.
Nice. Well, thank you. We'll start with the questions. So is Telos a layer 2? And if not, how is it different?
Sure. So Telos is actually a layer 1. So the main differences between layer 2s and layer 1s are layer 2s roll up to layer 1s and require separate networks to ensure consensus and validation of blocks. So we are completely independent. So for example, like Polygon is a layer 2, Arbitrum is a layer 2. They're all supported by the Ethereum network. If there are issues with Ethereum, they become issues with those. We are our own standalone network with our own set of validators or block producers that support the network. And so we're not reliant in any other way on other networks to achieve consensus.
Okay. Will you be building a bridge to your blockchains?
Yeah, so we already have multiple bridge solutions that we work with. In the future, there are opportunities that we are currently exploring. We actually recently just hired a head of ZK technology, which is going to be looking at zero network proofs to allow basically not permissionless, but bridgeless transactions across chain and communication. But for now, we do that through primarily third-party bridge providers, and we are very, very careful about the ones that we work with because that is one of the main kind of attack vectors in Web3, where there's been a lot of exploits historically. So we take a very hard look at the different bridge solutions that are out there, and we're only working with ones that actually don't have any history of compromise.
Okay. Considering Telos EVM, will Telos eventually transition to being an L2 on Ethereum?
So at this time, we have no plans of becoming an L2, scaling solution. We believe, at our core, the technology is highly scalable in its own right and doesn't necessarily require, kind of tying in. But again, as I mentioned, there are a lot of interesting opportunities for basically bridgeless cross communication and cross compatibility among chains, and that's something that we're exploring. A lot of that was actually laid out in our latest TED-P governance proposal, which outlines some of the solutions that we're looking at. So that can include side chains, that can include a layer 0 option, which can support, and cross communicate with, several other chains, and ideally all of them that are out there. We certainly feel that over time, a multi-chain world and hopefully a world where you don't have to necessarily deal with the ins and outs of transferring across, networks becomes kind of an issue for an everyday user.
Okay. Could you describe the differences between Telos EVM, Telos One, and Telos Zero?
Yeah, so just a slight nomenclature. There's Telos Native and Telos EVM. Probably a good opportunity to give a little bit of a background on kind of what Telos is. So we were launched in 2018. Our native network has been up now for 4.5 years with zero downtime. That is a C++ based base layer that was chosen for a variety of reasons. Certainly performance is up there. About over a year and a half ago now, we launched our EVM, which actually sits as a smart contract layer on top of our native network. That allows the EVM to basically inherit all the performance benefits of the native layer, while allowing, where most of the developers in the space are building, which is an EVM-based toolkit. Probably 80 to 90% of all the development work that's been happening and is continuing to happen in the blockchain space is leveraging an EVM toolkit, which is why we felt it necessary to make that compatibility a key piece of our infrastructure. Telos Zero is something that we have kind of outlined the bones of. The idea here is that ultimately Telos can become a layer 0 network. And what that means is it can provide interoperability between all other networks, both EVM and non-EVM, and allow that communication, messaging, and transferring of assets between them to effectively create much more interoperability. We recently hired a lead for that. He comes with a deep ZK technology background. And so we're outlining kind of the parameters of what that's going to look like now.
So will the Telos Zero, will that make it so it's compatible with like other layer 2s, or sorry, I don't know.
The idea is it would create compatibility across chains, right? So right now there are things called bridges, which allow you to bridge assets from one chain to another. Those tend to be some of the most exploited applications in blockchain today. So there's a risk profile associated with it that I don't think anyone particularly loves. By going to a layer 0 network, it would allow that to happen without the requirement of bridging, and therefore happen in a much more secure way.
Okay, cool. Will the Telos Zero ecosystem include the ability to connect to Ethereum mainnet?
Yep, that is the idea, right? So Ethereum,
Okay.
but several other networks as well, not just limited to Ethereum.
Okay, all right, good to know. And what makes the Telos ecosystem unique? And what is its relationship to, what is this, EOS? Is that how you say it? Or is it
Yeah,
EOS?
Yeah. So our core network protocol was built off what was originally called the EOS IO operating system. That is a C++ based network, as I mentioned. That's been rebranded as Antelope now, where the development kind of continues on that. We were effectively forked from EOS, right? And there were some challenges that EOS had. I think the core principal kind of tenets behind building in C++ originally is that there are millions of developers worldwide that build in C++. So it was kind of a natural way that if we were going to grow a new blockchain ecosystem, there's already kind of this built-in network of developers. What ended up happening is as people started building in blockchain on C++, it turns out it was like learning a brand new programming language. And so, after we launched, we saw that the vast majority of the development activity was actually happening in an Ethereum virtual machine toolkit, right? And as a little bit of history, Ethereum was launched, and then several other chains took what was called the Go ETH or Go Ethereum kind of code base and forked it. I believe it was 15-ish chains at the time. We went a different route. So our development team basically built an EVM from the ground up. And interestingly, in the process, identified a network vulnerability in the core Go Ethereum code base, which required every other chain that used that to upgrade to patch that security flaw. So we think our dev team is pretty top notch and knows what they're doing, both on the security and network side of things.
Oh, nice. So Crybad's going to ask a couple of questions about the GameStop partnership.
Sure.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us today. So how does Telos fit in with the existing GameStop Marketplace?
So that's a great question. So it's the existing marketplace is nft.gamestop.com. That was launched with Loopring and IMX. It's basically purely an NFT marketplace. So Playr, which is what we're collaborating on, is a bit different, right? So rather than just being able to buy and trade NFTs, this is going to be a game launcher. So think of it as kind of the Web3 version of Steam. And this was one of the reasons we were so excited about this. The idea is rather than, pay to play initially or get involved in the Web3 space so you can engage with these games, this is going to be gaming, gameplay first, right? So all the games that are going to be launched on it will have free to play options. rather than saying, hey, let's token gate this and make you buy an NFT before you can even do anything, if in fact there's even a game supporting it, because if you look at kind of the early days of crypto gaming, a lot of it was, land sales and equipment sales and, avatar sales for a game that was, promised to come in 12 to 18 months. A lot of those games never materialized. And certainly the game quality and the funness of the games was not there. We're seeing a big shift now where they're, in addition to, a lot of the Web3 focused, game companies, there are a number of large traditional IPs that are looking to dabble in the space. There's certainly rumors, for example, the next Grand Theft Auto coming out in 2024 is rumored to have an NFT component. So, I think there's been a lot of folks that have been dabbling and exploring this, and it's now, timing, I think, is critically important to all of this, where gameplay is getting much, much better for all these games that are Web3 enabled. And if you think about it on a big picture stage, right, there's a marketplace now just for skins, right, that's $50 billion a year. If you're, in Epic Games and you want to buy an avatar or a Fortnite skin, you can do that. What doesn't exist today is effectively secondary markets. There are some kind of black market secondary sales things where you can, trade on some of these clandestine, trading sites, and you hope that the person shows up and drops you a loot box with what you paid for. The reason isn't because the games themselves don't want to be a part of this. They absolutely do. The reason is a legal reason, right? So there are no gaming studios that are effectively allowed to custody assets for users, which basically makes it this single sale thing. It doesn't have resale value. The reason for that is if you want to do that, you have to get a money transmitter license and effectively become a bank holding company. So a lot of these, traditional gaming IPs are really interested in the concept of blockchain for that. And not only because, it creates this secondary market that they can kind of abstract away from themselves. But it also creates a dynamic where if you poll traditional gamers, the vast majority, 75% plus, say they will pay more for a skin or a collectible in a game if they know that they own it and it has resale value. So there's a lot of opportunity here that blockchain unlocks for traditional gaming that I think, a lot of the big IPs and a lot of the big studios are wisening up to, and they see this as a huge opportunity. So that's how we think about it. NFT hopefully, soon becomes abstracted away. It's still a 4-letter word for, most traditional gamers. Digital assets, right? Player-owned assets, whatever you want to call them. But that's ultimately what we view as one of the most logical use cases of smart contracts is allowing to kind of abstract that ownership away from the developer, but give everyone kind of additional benefits from in-game ownership, resales, royalties. There's a whole kind of slew of new business models that can come with that I think, Web3 is going to unlock.
To expand upon this question just a little bit, you had mentioned, a player kind of being a Steam type of thing. And is there, besides in-game assets, do you think that the future would also be trading games itself, right? If, purchasing a game, just like GameStop's, secondary market for used games, used physical copy games, is Playr, is that something that Playr could possibly do in the future?
It absolutely is, right? So there are ways through NFT tech to basically token gate the ability to play a game, right? So there might be a free option and then a premium option where effectively, instead of buying the game cartridge, you buy an NFT, which allows you access into like the broader space of the game. So yeah, to your point, right? And this is something that GameStop is very familiar with, right? You can go buy a game and then you can go resell it. This is absolutely something that we see, and not necessarily it's not necessarily something that GameStop is going to drive or be necessarily kind of the deciding factor on, but a lot of the games and the game studios themselves see this model as a really interesting way to kind of expand on their gameplay. So it's totally something that's in play. I think there's quite honestly a whole host of things that people haven't thought up of yet of how you can use NFTs and player-owned assets to to kind of change the way gameplay works. We've already, talked to several gaming studios that have, kill to earn, type models, right? Or, if you're in a racing game, I love the concept of, I'm a big Fast and Furious fan. So racing your car for pink slips, right? Where you can't just renege on that when it's done, right? If you lose, guess what? You don't have your car anymore, and you got to go start over. So it kind of increases the table stakes for the hardcore gamers, and we're already seeing some of that behavior, start to come out in the Web3 space today. And I think there's a lot more room for innovation, which is really exciting.
What are the potential benefits for users that have an existing GameStop wallet embracing the Web3 games supported by Telos through the GameStop's Playr launcher?
Yeah, so good question. Excuse me. From the wallet side of things, what we are looking to do is create the easiest onboarding kind of paradigm for gaming, right? So the idea of a seed phrase really needs to go away, right? Write down and store your seed phrase somewhere just in case. Everything is kind of moving to social logins, so either login through existing accounts or email logins, right? Just so it feels a lot more like a traditional gaming environment. So we're in the process now, and I can't say we have kind of final decisions on what those wallet solutions will be, but we've got a lot of interesting things in store. To be honest, I don't exactly know what GameStop's stance is on their existing wallet. My guess is it will be integrated, but again, it felt more like a Web3 native solution, and we're looking to try to abstract all of those, friction points out of what the future of this is going to look like.
What is the creative brief, at least as much as you can share publicly, for the GameStop Playr?
Yeah, so I can kind of put it in my words. Obviously, don't want to speak on behalf of GameStop, but as I mentioned, when we started having conversations, the first thing that popped into my head is, wow, this is going to be the Steam for Web3 gaming, right? So it's a intuitive, easy to use game launcher that you can log in and start playing games for free. There is an aspect where, they have their terms of service. So not necessarily every game that is launched on Telos will be on Playr. So they'll have kind of their own internal review process. But suffice to say, based on our partnership, the vast majority of games that are going to be supported will be supported by Telos. There will be some legacy games that they're already working with that will likely be supported on Playr, but basically all of the net new games that get added to the ecosystem will be supported on the Telos blockchain network.
What is in kind of a broader scope, what is the value to the user, and how does it evolve the overall broad gaming market?
Yeah, so it's interesting, right? So if you look at kind of the main distribution platforms for gaming, you've got iOS, you've got Google, you've got Steam. They've all kind of taken after the Apple model of let's take 30% of everything. I think that's been a real challenge to a lot of the game developers and a lot of the game players, because ultimately those costs are going to be passed through to the players. I think there's a big opportunity to disrupt that. We're personally really excited about, what GameStop brings to the table, because they're in a relatively unique position. In an effect, they're kind of a Switzerland of the gaming world, right? They're not their own gaming studio. They don't make games that compete with traditional, developers like Epic or Blizzard, right? They kind of stay in their swim lane, and that I think creates a really interesting opportunity, right? So they have 50 million customers annually. 5.5 million paying pro subscribers, which kind of are considered the whales of the gaming industry. They pay a lot of money on a regular basis to play games at a premium level. 30 million visitors to their website monthly. And one of the things that we are going to be doing is heavily promoting in their traditional channels some of these Web3 games. So think marketing packages that would rival something that a Call of Duty or a Halo would get, where they get in-store placements, they get website placements, posters, store clerks understanding the game mechanics and can educate, prospective players on the game. And we think this is really going to kind of open the doors pretty wide to Web3 gaming. And to put that in broader context, I was at an event called 3XP, which is a Web3, focused gaming conference last week. As I started my conversations, I said, hey, there's probably about 1 million gamers in Web3, which is an incredibly small number. And the more and more you talk to actually some of these game, developers, they're like, yeah, the number's probably closer to like 300 to 500,000 actual gamers. There's 2 million wallets that are associated with, humans that are playing these games. But this is like, we haven't even scratched the surface of the overall 3 billion gamer worldwide market. So we think we've got a real opportunity here to grow this space tremendously through the GameStop brand, through their access and their distribution capabilities.
What do you guys offer GameStop that isn't already available from either Immutable or Loopring? What differentiates it?
I'll be very careful. I won't opine on Loopring and IMX specifically, but what I can say is I know what they were looking for when they found us, right? So there's a few kind of critical criteria. One is a track record of no unscheduled downtime, which not many chains can boast. We've had that for 4.5 years, and that was, I would say, top of the list because they're looking at scaling this thing up meaningfully, and you've got to make sure the network is going to work and is going to be reliable. So that's one. Two is performance, right? So we can boast 15,200 transactions per second. That was validated by a third-party report that'll be coming out, I believe, next week, done with Baylor University. So, massive transaction throughput. We also have half-second block times, and block times are the time it takes to achieve consensus among the network. And so when you think about what a traditional gamer's experience is going to be like, if they want to buy a digital skin, right, they want to see it available and ready effectively right away, like it would be if you're buying something on Xbox Live or Steam or otherwise. So any lag in that network, even if it's 5-10 seconds, it's going to create that weird panicky feel that for those of you who've used the Ethereum network is near and dear to your heart, where you kind of are pacing back and forth waiting for your transaction to happen, and finally it does. We don't have that problem, so everything is going to feel like it's happening in real time. The other thing that we do that is pretty unique in the industry is we don't allow for what's called miner extracted value, which is a fancy term for front running on trading, right? So on the Ethereum network and on most other networks, you can effectively pay more gas to cut the line, right? Which means on a congested day, in the Ethereum network, the gas fees are out of control right now. But even if you use like a secondary network, you might pay 5 cents, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and you might pay 35 cents at 6 o'clock in the evening, right? Just depending on the congestion of the network. And that's because of the mechanic of miner extracted value, right? You basically pay more to the people that validate the network to jump the line and make sure that your transaction goes through. We process everything first in, first out. First and foremost, we thought that was fair. That's, certainly what the traditional markets have deemed, legal and compliant. So that was an important one for us from a fairness of the network. And it's also important, right, for traditional gamers and game developers is to have a very predictable gas paradigm. And typically our gas is going to be in the range of half a penny to a penny per transaction. So very low cost, but the most important thing is it's stable and it can be predicted, kind of day in, day out. Last but not least is we are incredibly energy efficient. So we're built in C++. C++ is one of the most energy efficient programming languages on the planet, which means we can boast energy consumption per transaction on par or below that of Visa and MasterCard. So it kind of takes away that energy, environmental concern that I think a lot of people had, certainly, a year, 18 months ago with blockchain in general. But, suffice to say that if you go, use your Visa to go buy a coffee at Starbucks, your energy consumption is going to be no different than if you're transacting on our network. So that was important. And then I think a little bit of icing on the cake, and I know they didn't identify this specifically as a criteria for us, but we have a history that's a little bit unique in the industry where we did not do an ICO. We did what's called a fair launch, no ICO, where we airdropped all of our tokens to basically users of blockchain users based on their wallet activity. So we didn't raise capital through VCs. We don't have this concentrated ownership thing that clearly now is certainly in the limelight with the SEC calling out some specific names in the layer 1 and layer 2 communities about, basically how they raise capital and what that implies, right? So having, kind of avoided that, may have been just a little bit of icing on the cake, because we're certainly going through some interesting times when it comes to kind of where regulation is going to take this space.
Are there going to be any benefits for early adopters, either from game makers or players, as far as games that are built or powered by Telos?
Yeah, great question. I think a lot of this is going to come down to how some of the games decide to activate NFT token gating and things of that nature. We've had several conversations with dozens of different game developers that have games available to play now. There's discussions of free airdrops to the early adopters that come in that may get them exclusive access or premium benefits in game. I think there's a lot of interesting things. Not all of it has been ironed out, and a lot of it will be individual game dependent. But I think there is generally this motivation to get folks, in and playing these games. So that should naturally result in some, early adopter advantages for sure.
Will games from other blockchains be able to integrate with the GameStop Playr?
If they integrate with Telos. And so again, being an EVM, and the EVM is what is being supported here. Any other game that one passes GameStop's terms of service and is deemed an acceptable game from a gameplay standpoint, and a lot of that just comes down to quality, right? So they just don't want a bunch of crappy games, and there is a history of some horrible, not fun to play games where you're basically kind of going in and farming on a daily basis to get your rewards, weird tokenomic stuff that felt a little bit more like a casino. It's going to be gameplay first. But to answer the question, yes, and there are a number of games that we're in conversations with that are already live on other chains, but if they want to interact with Playr, would need to be integrated with Telos.
A little bit of a harder question regarding the existing GameStop wallet, and as Playr gets rolled out, it sounds like they're two pretty separate wallets. Is there going to be plans to integrate the GameStop wallet into the ecosystem of Telos? Yeah.
So we're in discussions with kind of making the determinations on what the kind of wallets of choice will be to make sure that these onboarding steps are easy. I can't comment right now on kind of what the final decision is going to be, but we're going through those discussions as we speak.
Nice.
All right. You take it
All
back.
right. Yeah, we're going quick today. All right, we got a few more. Did you target onboarding AAA games or smaller indie games first? And what games can we expect to see released on your platform in the future?
So great question. It's a mix of both, right? We've had some really interesting, conversations with some really high quality, IP game developers. And I can't name specific names, but I mean, these are brands and franchises that, almost everyone listening in would know, that are eager to step into this space. And in addition to that, right, there are several games now, and this has kind of been an evolution of the Web3 gaming market, where the quality of game has just gone up tremendously, right? I mentioned 3XP. It was actually the first show that I've been to where people wanted to sit down and play these games for more than 30 seconds, which was just a really positive development, I would say. I mean, even 6 months ago, 9 months ago, you weren't seeing the quality of gameplay where it is today. So we're targeting a lot of those games as well, mostly because they're ready. They've got their ecosystem built out. They've got a live game. They understand the blockchain component. Some of the bigger IPs, I think, will just take longer, right? Because they're going to be really careful. They want to do it right. They're also new to the space. So there's an education component there, but we are targeting a little bit of everything, as long as, first and foremost, the gameplay is high quality.
This isn't a question on here, just kind of my own question. Will you guys be able to integrate the games that are already existing, like the IMX games, like Gods Unchained and stuff? Like, do you know if that'll end up working with GameStop Playr, or do you not know?
Yeah, so I believe there are a handful of titles, and I don't have the specific names or numbers, but there are some existing IMX games that will be supported on Playr. They may end up going multi-chain. They may work with us. They may stick with IMX. That is kind of TBD and on a kind of one-off basis, right?
Okay, cool. Well, thanks for the answer.
Yep. And there are some
how
quality
many-
games there, so I think
There are, yeah. I play Gods Unchained every day. That's why. That's the only reason why I thought of it.
Again, if it's a quality game that people like to play, there's a good chance that it ends up on Playr.
Yeah. I mean, the number one thing, it just has to be fun, right? Everything else is secondary. How many games do you expect to launch by the end of the year on your chain?
So on our chain, again, will be a little bit different, right, than necessarily Playr. And I've actually been specifically said don't opine on kind of where we're at. But let's just say this, right? On Steam, there's like 20 to 30,000 games. We're talking orders of magnitude less than that. So it's going to be a pretty tight roster. Right, which from a gaming standpoint, you're going to have a really unique opportunity to get a ton of eyeballs on you. One of my colleagues made a great example. I don't know if you guys had an N64, but if you remember Wave Race 64, right? It was one of the early releases on that platform and became wildly popular as a result. So kind of that first mover advantage is certainly going to apply here, where you're going to have a limited set of titles that is going to get you kind of more concentrated eyeballs on your game, and it's going to be a relatively slow rollout because we're not just going to throw a ton of stuff up there. It's going to need to be high quality stuff.
Okay. In regards to, we can break down many of the barriers currently deterring Web 2 players from embracing Web 3. What barriers have been identified and what strategies are being devised to overcome them?
Yep. So as I mentioned a couple of times already, the wallet experience historically is just horrible, right? It certainly scared me. I mean, I think I first started getting into crypto in 2017. You start with the Bitcoin white paper, then you kind of go down the smart contract, Ethereum rabbit hole. But even then, it took me kind of years to get comfortable using some of this stuff, right? And just feeling like it was kind of ready for prime time. I think where we're going with this is, again, login and a login experience that feels like a traditional login, right? Okay, you want to sign in with your Gmail? Do you want to sign in with Facebook account? Do you want to just use your email to sign up, right? No seed phrases. That's one of the biggest barriers. Certainly the speed of the network is going to be a challenge. We think that's where we come in to help solve that, so transactions effectively happen in real time. And then, payment rails, right? So we're targeting largely people that are not crypto native, that, have never used a wallet, that don't have any crypto in a wallet to be able to purchase things. So think fiat to crypto solutions, fiat directly to NFT solutions, and less clicks, right, along the way, which, if it's more than 3, that might be enough to scare away a traditional gamer. So we're looking at putting all those solutions in place to make this, really seamless and feel like a Web 2 or traditional gaming environment where all the things that they're comfortable with, kind of apply in this space.
Nice. Will you guys be doing any type of education or promotion to gain buy-in and understanding from older investors that are hesitant to new technologies?
Yeah, of course, right. But again, ideally, I think this is where a lot of chains historically, and even a lot of Web3 games historically, have stumbled. They've focused way too much on the, hey, fully educate yourself on blockchain. I know we were talking offline, kind of before we went live, where not everyone knows the ins and outs of alternating current. So but they know how to turn on a light switch, right? Everything used to be an MP3. Now it's just, my music, right? So we're trying to abstract a lot of that away. Yes, of course, for those that want to kind of go deeper and understand this, there will be all sorts of resources available. And we currently have a lot of those resources available on our website, telos.net, where you can, if you want to learn more, right, it's all there. But I genuinely think that a lot of people ultimately won't care. They want to say, hey, I want to play this game. This is a really fun experience. Great. I want to go buy my own skin to personalize this to myself, or, buy access to this tournament or whatever it is. Right. And that's, again, let's abstract away all of the technical blockchain architecture language from that and just say, hey, how do you do this easily? And how does it happen intuitively?
Yeah. Well, our last question, I feel like you just answered this and all of those other questions, is how do you plan to turn skeptics into advocates? I mean, if you want to answer that, but as like an overall, but it sounds like it's just, making it easy and fun and just making it easy to use, right?
Gameplay first, right? That was the big stumbling point, I think, with all of Web3 gaming, certainly 18 months ago. It's changing, right? So there are quality games, and I think our job is to make sure that the solution that's presented to folks is easy, intuitive, and doesn't feel like old Web3, right? It feels like a familiar experience that is not going to create confusion, is not going to create friction points along the journey. It's just gonna feel like everything else feels, right, in the traditional space.
Mm-hmm. Are you able to provide any insight on your timeline at all?
Coming soon, I believe, was the exact
soon.
It was the exact knowledge that I'm verbiage that I'm allowed to use. So, but yes, soon. It's really
trademark.
All I can
say. Yep.
Yeah.
All right, sounds good. Is there anything else that you want to add that we didn't ask?
No, I think really loved your line of questioning. It sounds like you got some really sharp listeners in the audience that kind of know their stuff, both on the technical side, but there's probably also a bunch of gamers in there that want to know, hey, this isn't going to be, like the crap first time I try to do this, or why am I doing this, right? I mean, I think the big takeaway is blockchain unlocks a huge amount of potential, right? And the thing that's most important from a gamer standpoint is, right now, if you're buying any digital assets from a game, you're effectively renting them, right? Those games reserve the right to shut off the functionality of that, or sunset, whatever, weapon you've bought or whatever. That won't happen, and you will own those assets. They will have resale value, and there will be marketplaces where you can transact along those things, which I think is just the first step of all the benefits that are coming to what Web3 can bring to gaming, right? Again, the concepts of kill to earn or kind of higher stakes stuff. It's all coming, right? And a lot of the games have already thought about really creative ways that you can basically make the gaming experience, kind of novel, that in ways that you couldn't do that in traditional, not blockchain-based gaming.
Nice. So owning your own assets, basically.
That's I mean, ultimately, yeah. So at some point, you're not going to hear the word NFT anymore. It's kind of a four-letter word for us, even in the industry, right? And certainly amongst gamers. So, a lot of that, I think, is just going to go away, and the benefits will trickle down to the folks that start getting involved.
Nice. Good to know. Well, thank you so much for doing this. That's all the questions we have.
Thanks for the time, guys. Really appreciate it.
And actually, Luma, if you can hold on, I have kind of one harder hitting question, and we can either cut it or not. So if you don't mind, we're just splice it in. Because I know that our crypto guy, he's been typing a whole bunch of stuff in the background. So just, do you fear that going after the more casual gamer via the social media type of login, do you think that's going to alienate the more security minded crypto users that are already in the space?
I'm not necessarily sure we're only targeting the casual gamers, right? So there is that kind of subset, right, where kind of free only is their thing, right? They're happy to watch ads so they can then play their thing. I think it's not going to be exclusively, and honestly, I think the folks that take the step from playing the games to doing the owned asset stuff is kind of a different class of player who is comfortable paying for things. Right. I mean, there is the hyper casual thing, and I haven't owned a console in several years, mostly because I'd probably lose all my friends, family, and that wouldn't be great for my personal life, because I do love gaming, at its core. But there are folks that are used to paying $70 for a title and paying a lot of money for skins, and that's I think that's where the benefit really accrues. So we're not just going to be focused on hyper casual. As a point of clarification, this will be a browser first experience. Yes, there are plans to bring a mobile solution, but that won't come day one. So most people that sit down on their computer to play games want a higher quality, higher fidelity experience, and are typically the ones that are paying for some of these things. So there's room for both.
All right. I think that's all I have for now. So thank you.
Cool.
DRS.